All right, bring in the crowd.
Bless you.
Bless you.
Don't start.
How are you? Long day at the office, man. This is just once the courts start opening up. Yeah.
Ready? Clerk Peters, you ready? Okay. Good evening. I'm going to call to order the City of Groton Special Mayor and Council meeting for Monday, May 21st, 2021. Clerk Peters, please call the roll.
Present, we have Mayor Keith Hedrick, Deputy Mayor Guinevere Depot, Councilor Rashad Carter, Councilor Lisa McCabe via Zoom, Councilor Paul Norris, Councilor Christine Piazza, Councilor Stephen Sheffield, City Clerk Megan Peters, and Director of Finance Ron Uhas.
Okay. I'll stand to salute the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, new business. Councilor Norris, will you please read Resolution R-21-5-89?
Therefore, be it resolved that the mayor and council approve the appointment of Patrick B. Corner as a firefighter EMT in the City of Groton Fire Department effective May 25th, 2021. I so move.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. This was discussed during an executive session. Chief, will you please address the council and the public?
Graduated from North Street Academy. He has taken classes at Groton, and then became volunteer in multiple departments in the area. He was a firefighter. He was in service for years as a firefighter, as a contract firefighter, and then he settled in at Massachusetts Fire Department for contract. So he has firefighter 2, he has fire instructor 2, has an operational tech, along with numerous certificates. And we are very excited that we have as a candidate and ready to bring him up and train up. So I think he's up for a resolution. Take your vote.
Okay, comments from the council? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. Clerk Peters? Well, Clerk Peters will come up. Patrick, please come forward. And Clerk Peters will do this, will do the oath.
I'm going to ask you to raise your right hand. Do you, Patrick B. Cornier, solemnly swear or affirm that you will
Okay. And now for the pinning. Okay, Patrick, you have the floor. I'm sorry, what? Okay.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Council.
Thank you. Welcome aboard. And I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention? Motion carries. We are adjourned. We will recess for 5 minutes so that we can get pictures if you want to take pictures. Nope. Nope, that's okay. Well, then, well, do you want to do, you want to just go take pictures up there, or do we want to take pictures here? Patrick, what would you like? Okay, you ready? Okay. Good evening. Welcome to the City of Groton Committee of the Whole for Monday, May 24th, 2021. Clerk Peters, please call the roll.
Present, we have Mayor Keith Hedrick, Deputy Mayor Guinevere Depot, Councilor Rashad Carter, Councilor Lisa McCabe via Zoom, Councilor Paul Norris, Councilor Christine Piazza, Councilor Stephen Sheffield, Clerk Megan Peters, and Director of Finance Ron Uhas.
Okay. So before we get into the referrals, I just want to remind the council and everybody out there that from 12:30 to 2:30 tomorrow at St. John's Christian Church, we'll be doing a food drive in affiliation with the Jim and Moran Food Center. This is part of the Farmers to Families program. This is a 30-pound box of food. It contains milk, other dairy, cheese, and yogurt and other dairy products. It contains fruits and vegetables and cooked proteins. So we will be handing those out tomorrow at St. John's Christian Church. In addition to that, Ledgelight Health District will be issuing Moderna and Johnson & Johnson vaccines during the same period of time. So we're teaming with them, and they will now be with us at our food drives when we do this, and we're anticipating this to continue monthly throughout the future. So if that changes, I'll let you know. All right, referrals. Number one, the first one is Jim Streeter, Planning and Zoning. This is a reappointment. You have the information in your packet. Any questions on Jim? Okay, I need a motion to move this to the mayor and council meeting of June 7th, 2021.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention? Motion carries. The next one is Sue Bergeron. She is also a reappointment to Planning and Zoning. I need a motion to move her are there any questions from the council? Okay, I need a motion to move her to the mayor and council meeting of June 7th, 2021.
So moved.
Second.
So we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention? Motion carries. Okay, the new appointments, Terry Rice is a new appointment to Planning and Zoning, and Terry is here today, and you have some information in your packets. Any questions for Terry? Terry, would you like to come up and address council? Can we get him a...
Appreciate the opportunity.
All right.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity. We moved here last year. I know you have the information. I've done planning, zoning, municipal work for 4 decades, representing municipalities, representing applicants. So I have some background in it. I appreciate the opportunity. I think Groton is a wonderful community. I have a lot to learn about the community and what your goals are and so forth, but I think this is an exciting experience, and I look forward to it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Question, Deputy Mayor?
Less of a question, but I just wanted to say, and I probably am a broken record, I say this almost every time, but I just want to thank you for volunteering, especially now in our area. Planning and zoning is kind of a hot button issue, and it's very complicated, and we get a lot of feedback about it. So volunteering to be on this particular commission is, you know, a big deal to me, because you don't have to do it, it's volunteer. So I just want to say from us, thank you for volunteering your time, especially someone who's got a background, so you know how complicated it is
Thank you.
already.
Thank you.
So I want to make sure that people know we appreciate when people volunteer for stuff, because we frequently have vacancies and we don't always have volunteers to fill them.
Thank
So
you. I appreciate it. It sounds like you're suggesting I should get a flag fest, though.
No.
No, it's not that bad. Councilor Sheffield.
Thank you again, Mr. Rice, for serving. Now, you said you recently moved here?
Yes.
From New York?
Yes.
Okay. Are you practicing law currently?
I'm still practicing in New York. I figured when I moved up here, I would have to go back and commute once a week, perhaps, for some meetings and so forth. One of probably the only beneficial aspect of the COVID-19 was I've been going to court and been going to planning board and zoning board meetings remotely, so I haven't had to do that at all. Recently became admitted in Connecticut, but you know, I'm kind of tailing off New York.
So you plan on staying here?
Oh, yeah,
long
no,
term? Okay.
this is, you know, I'm 70 years old. This is where we're going to retire to, so.
Excellent. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the council? Okay. I need a motion to move this to the mayor and council meeting of June 7th, 2021.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention? And thank you very much, Mr.
Thank you,
Rice.
Mayor. Thank you, council members.
Okay, the next is Charles Wang. You have on your agenda planning and zoning, but this morning, when I was talking to the department heads, we found we have a need for a position in harbor management. So instead of going to planning and zoning, we've asked him to fill a position in harbor management. So, Mr. Wang, would you like to approach the council? Thank you, sir.
Hello, my name is Charlie Huang. I've been here since 1999. I built my house in Jupiter Point Road, and I'm here to serve. Any questions?
Are you okay with?
Questions from the council? Councilor Carter.
Are you okay with what was asked to switch?
As I told you, I'm here to serve, so doesn't matter, and is there any way I can help? I'd love to help. This is my city, so.
Councilor Sheffield. You did have a hand up, right?
What made you, I know you say you want to serve, but what's your motivation about it?
Well, when I built my house, 1999, and I have to come to zoning board for 4 times. So every time I come here, they say you have to change this. So I submit it next month. Then they say they come up with a new one. So I finally, 4th time, I finally told them, I said, why didn't you tell me 3 months ago, 4 months ago, right? That's not the zoning board is about, right? Trying to help. So long story short, I saw that. So finally, I spoke to mayor one time and I said, do you know what, time for me to serve. So if any way I can help this community, and if something we don't like, something is harmful to our city, then I have to stop, obviously. But something we have to advance, and I really want to promote that. So that's why I'm here.
One more question.
Sure.
Councilor Sheffield.
Are you, like I said, open, are you receptive to learning new different things? Is this something, the harbor management, something is?
Yes, sir, because I do, so I'm on Jupiter Point, so I have own dock. So I kind of learn regulation, but I have to learn a lot because my trade I'm an electrical engineer and computer engineering side. So, but I have to learn a lot. But I know a little bit about the ocean side, yeah. Especially development, and I do a lot at my work. So.
Thank you.
Other questions from the council? Okay, hearing none. I'd like to move this to the mayor and council. Need a motion to move this mayor and council meeting of June 7th?
So moved.
We have a motion
Second.
and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. Thank you, Ms. Swan.
Thank you.
Okay. Number 2 is going to be 783, which is the Groton City Brew Run. And I've invited Bruce Flax, who is the Executive Director of the Greater Mystic Chamber of Commerce, to come here tonight. So Bruce, would you like to come up? We'll get you a microphone that works, hopefully.
Can you hear me? All
You're
right.
good.
Thank you. Thanks for council for having me. We're working, Greater Mystic Chamber is working with Groton Utilities, who has graciously put forth some money to support a 5K beer run that would start and end at Eastern Point Beach. We'll be meeting with Joe and members of Groton Utilities in the city to put this together. The chamber is had in the last 10 or 15 years, we had the Fall Festival at Pequannock Plains, and we wanted to kind of change it out a little bit and do something a little bit more, I don't know, something different that might interest more people than just the festival. And so with working with everybody in the city and the Groton Utilities, we came up with a 5K beer run, and it would have obviously a beer component. But we had the police at our meetings and trying to make sure that we're safe. There'd be a separate area for the beer. And then we would have a band and a stage and food trucks. So if people want to do the beer run The beer and the run, they would pay a admission price. If they wanted to do the beer, it would be a separate admission price. And if families wanted to come and not partake in the beer or the run, they would be able to do so for free and just buy food at the food vendors. So it looks like a really nice event. I'm really excited about it. It's I think it's great that from the chamber standpoint, I think we have a responsibility to the Groton Business Association was merged with Mystic Chamber back in 2018. And there's a desire, I know Groton Utilities has that desire, and so do we, to include Groton. And having an event at Groton City would be great. I think it would be great for Groton City, it'd be great for the town of Groton, and great for the chamber. And so we're really excited about having this kind of event there.
Okay, hold on a minute. Was there anything in the, okay, so this is the chamber side of it. Jill is going to present the city side of it, and we'll get to the ask from the council, because you're probably wondering why are you guys getting briefed. Here's why you're being briefed. This is one of the things we've been talking about, and we talked about this before COVID, was having a beer run here in the city. We haven't had one either ever or in a long time. And now coming out of COVID, this is a great opportunity to showcase the city, show off part of the city. And I think it's a good thing. Bruce and Groton Utilities, we are members of Groton Utilities, is a member of the Greater Mystic Chamber of Commerce. And so there was an idea, it was floated and it's matured, and we've been meeting, and this is what's come out of it. So Jill, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Council. The reason why we're here before you tonight, you're really the first step. There is no alcohol consumption at Eastern Point Beach, with the exception of in the Zaberski House, if you get a permit for that. So the reason why we're coming to you is that we would like to have a resolution go through that we are allowed to have beer on premises that one day. It would be within the beer garden, and it would only be from distributors of the event, not people bringing in alcohol that day. It would obviously be monitored by people to make sure that everyone's over the age of 21 and that people weren't using too much or drinking too much. So we're coming before you to ask your permission. Basically, we'll have a resolution, if you're interested in this, of having alcohol on the beach that one day.
And we have done this in the city before. If you are familiar with Submarine Century, a couple years ago, over in Washington Park, we did the same thing. Went through the same permissions and ordinance, not ordinance, resolution.
We did a resolution in 2016
Yep,
for that, yes.
resolution for that. So that's the precedence. Questions or comments? Councilor Carter.
There's just a few things. So I love the idea. When I saw it and I was thinking about it, I'm gonna say I think 3 or 4 years ago I brought something as a referral to do a 5K run, and it kind of got shelved. And when I saw this, can you hear me now? Oh, I can hear myself now. Yeah, so I'm totally for this event. I think that and I'll say it again. About 3 or 4 years ago, when I got on 4 years when I got on the council, I brought this as a referral to do some type of 5K or something, just to showcase the city. And I liked the idea of being at the beach. Another thing that I like is for years I ran. I mean, I still run, but not as much as I used to. But did the 5K, the half marathons, all that, And what I will say is that the running community is a very respectful community. They do their event, they contribute, very clean. I participated in several events, and not one running event I saw any type of dispute. It's a big community thing. So I'm for it. It's also gonna you're going to get people from, Glastonbury, from West Hartford. And it's a good opportunity for somebody that doesn't know Groton City in the area to participate in an event and at the beach, So I think that's good. The only thing I would say, or it's nothing, is do we know if is the name going to be the Groton City Brewfest, or is it going to be like a Brewfest sponsored by like Groton Utilities? Like, or is that the set name that you propose?
I think we're still talking about it.
Yeah.
But it's going to be, at the last meeting, it was the Groton City Brew Fest presented by, or like in cooperation with the Greater Mystic Chamber of Commerce. We will have the insurance for the event,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
it will come through our certificate.
Yeah, yeah. I'm just thinking it's not hindsight. I mean, not hindsight. Just thinking ahead of time. You know, just in case you do have some city residents that don't want their name behind a brew fest. You know, I don't know, or brew run rather. I don't know. You know, people think. You know. Second thing, just real quick. I think it's also. I'm glad that you are bringing the chamber. Sorry. Over this way. I think that's really good. That, you know, I think that's important to know that, you know, even town residents and people in Mystic, you know, they're welcome over here, you know. We're not stopping anybody from coming over, you know. And lastly, I would also say, can we also look at, but you said just this event, right? Could we, when we're working on changing the charter or whatever provisions, can we? I think it's things like this that get us jump started on what the city needs to do. You know, so I think, you know, just isolated it to this event. I think we should probably look at it as you know, possibility for other events. You know, because I know Jill, you had said just this event. I don't know. Will it be an opportunity to kind of where the wording is, where we don't have to come back and a resolution, you know?
So currently it's in the rules and regulations for Eastern Point Beach, which you guys approved in April. So that would definitely be something that we would have to look at next year when we look at rules and regulations.
So that's the reason why you can, okay, so that's why it's for just this event.
That's right.
Okay, got you.
And there's no reason to address this each time we have it. I mean, it's not like we're doing a brew run every weekend, right? So I think doing it for this one time for this event, not saying we're never going to do other
No, I'm not saying for
events.
us. I'm just saying in case somebody, like I said, we get somebody that comes to this event and you get, I don't know, you get Pratt and Whitney that says, hey, we want to do an event next month, you know, then we're at the same place, you
Yep.
know? That's what I was saying.
And Sierra is looking at other events, Sierra and Mary with Parks and Rec, we're looking at other events. Right now, we do not have other events coming up. So if we get an event that needs to come up and needs to get approval from the council, we will. If it ends up being where everybody wants to do all their brew fest from here, then maybe we'll look at it at a blanket thing. My preference at this point would have each individual one come to the council so it doesn't get misused.
Yeah, I got you.
And the council gets to ask the questions of the event sponsor.
Makes sense.
Does that make sense? Bruce, would you mind, well, hold on. Have we finalized the route? Or are we still?
We actually haven't finalized the route.
Okay,
We were
never
looking
mind
at a route that we've used in the past with Riverfront, and it's actually a little bit over the 3.1 miles, so there's another possible route. Yeah, there's a proposed route that is new. It would go up through Avery Point and then down Jupiter Point, down Tyler, and around, but we
try to
have
be like
not spoken with
US
anybody at Avery
OT
Point.
certified.
Okay, so so to the council, we're still revising what the route would be?
Is that could be certified, like a certified route? Is that what you're trying to
Yep.
get?
We had, one of our board members is Jeff Anderson, who owns Kelly's Pace in the
Yeah.
village
Yeah.
of Mystic. And he is very well aware, you know, he's very well versed in 5Ks.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so he noticed that the route was a little bit farther
Yeah, you gotta get
and
the
proposed this
certification and
route.
everything.
at-
Yeah. And then my other thing is, where are the proceeds going to? I didn't,
So if there is profit or there money to be made, it would go to the Greater Mystic Chamber.
okay.
Okay, other questions from other councilors? Deputy Mayor Depot?
Are we, first of all, I think it's a great idea. Are we incorporating like the local city businesses to either advertise or, I know you said food trucks. I know we have a couple of food trucks that are, you know, city-based, but have we already approached businesses or is that in the plan yet? Or where are we, how does that work?
It's in the planning right now. We've talked in the meetings about trying to offer up food trucks for Groton businesses, especially the city like Par 4. And then we would see what kind of response we got and see what we would need depending on the crowd. And as far as breweries go, we're working our way from the city inside out. So Beard and Outer Lights and make our way. But for an event like this, you need a good number of breweries because the people who are buying into the Brewfest are actually going to, as of right now, getting a 2 or 3 ounce sample glass that they'll bring around to the breweries to get samples of the beer. They don't buy like a 16 ounce and drink it. They sample all the beers that are there. So you need a good sampling of beers. So we're going to work with Connecticut, Groton, into Connecticut and out, depending on what kind of response we get.
And like Jill said, this is one of the first steps, right? Because if you don't get authorization from the council to do this, there is no beer run. There is no brew fest. So a lot of the details have not been fully worked out yet, but as we get closer, we'll bring more information to you so that the council is made aware of what's going on. Deputy Mayor Depot.
Part of the reason I asked that, I know breweries are one of the businesses that kind of suffered a lot during COVID because you can't really go inside a brewery if you're not allowed to go inside anywhere. My other question is, do we have an idea of, I know it's in the beginning, but when we want to do it, or when, is there like a goal?
We do have a date. It's October 2nd, and the run would be at 11 o'clock, and the event would be over by 3, and they would, right now, that's what we discussed, stop serving beer at 2. So the beer would be served from 12 to 2, after the beer run to 2 o'clock, and then the band would play until 3, and it would end at 3.
So therefore, there would be no conflicts with any other beach events.
The beach, I was thinking.
Right, because the beach season is already closed, it's over. So this would not be conflicting or competing with any other events that are going on, one at the beach, 2 in the city for that day at this point. Hold on, let me go to a first time.
Can I ask my last question? I'm sorry.
Yes.
Last question, where can people go to stay updated on it? To the Greater Mystic website? Is that where they
Yes,
should go?
as soon as the details are finalized, it will be on the Greater Mystic Chamber of Commerce website with how to get tickets and all that.
Okay.
And we will also share that. So share it either as an event or share it on a Facebook page. It will also be on our website. We will market this so that it gets widespread exposure.
Thank you, sorry.
Where are we? Councilor Piazza.
Thank you. I think it's a wonderful idea. Like Councilor Carter was talking about, many runners may come from other cities. So I want to know, is this specifically for people who usually run 5Ks, or is it wide open to everybody?
It's wide open.
Okay, and so my next question would be, how about for people with disabilities? Has that been discussed?
It has not been discussed, but I wouldn't, it's not ruled out for me as far as I'm concerned. If there's a desire for a pre-run or a during run, we would address that and make whatever changes we needed to do to accommodate.
I think one of the questions I ask is because I have children with disabilities, but also I know many people with disabilities, and I work for the department also. So it's great if they're included. But also, too, I was just thinking about the route that they run. Some areas are narrow, and how they would actually compromise those areas if that was in the works and thought of also.
Gotcha.
And right now, they're trying to get the route as flat as possible.
There's only one hill, like next to
Yeah,
Pfizer,
yep.
and that's the small hill.
So they're looking at that. Any other questions or comments? I'm sorry, Councilor Norris.
Sorry, I have a road map here. So you were talking about the runners receiving a 2-ounce cup or so?
Yeah.
So how many times can that be refilled?
Well, it's a great question. I mean, we don't want people to get drop dead drunk, and it's for enjoyment, not for getting inebriated. I think we still have to work that out in terms of, I'm not familiar with, whether it's the breweries that stop. I think the breweries who are serving know that they wouldn't serve somebody who appeared to be inebriated, but there's no checkoff card that says you get 6 glassfuls and that's all you get.
Sure. And did I hear you say that the beer area would be roped off or fenced off or
That's correct.
separately?
Like
Also-
a beer garden.
Thank you. Now, in terms of capacity, so how many people are you expecting, planning for, both in runners and spectators?
So it's a good question. I'm not sure we can actually predict. We'll monitor that, but Jeff from Kelly's Pace thought that a local 5K run would get 150 to 250 runners. I thought that was a little bit low for, I think this event's going to do very well. I think we're going to get a lot of people. So we haven't talked too much about capacity yet. I think that we need to figure out what that number is and stick to it. But I think the running number may be different, obviously, because if families come and they're going to attend and they don't have to pay and they're going to be in the Grafton area, that we definitely, in our discussions, need to come up with some capacity numbers, and I would work with the police and with the city.
I'm sorry, I'm going to keep going. I
No,
got a
that's
lot
fine.
here. So, in terms of, the reason why I ask is simple, one of the first things is parking.
Yep.
So we know if there's 200 folks, that works out to be about 120 cars. So where do those 120 cars go, plus additional 100 folks for the spectators? So I just wanted to be mindful of that.
And we have been, just so we've discussed it in the meeting. I think there's 225 spaces at the beach.
Yep.
And we've talked about reaching out to Avery Point to
Okay.
ask them for overflow.
Got it.
So there's 234 spaces at the beach, and then we can do overflow at Avery Point. They have plenty of parking over there as well. In the past, when we've looked at capacity in the beach park area, we've had around 300 and something people, 300, 350.
Excellent.
And that's not been an issue. You're talking, I think it's a 7-acre park. So it's, it's good size, and areas will be, now, we may lose some parking due to wherever you guys rather decide to set up certain events. But we have plenty of grass space and open space that we can do that with.
Thank you. Got more. So, why the beach and not any other parts of Groton City? And the reason why I ask that is the route, in my mind, is residential. So it's showing residential houses, not necessarily landmarks within the city. So it's just, and along with that, in looking at where the route is, because I'm a runner also, is that when you come off Tyler and you make a sharp right down Jupiter Point, that's not really conducive to someone, maybe someone jogging a 5K, but if you're running a 5K for distance or for time, it's a really sharp turn. But I'm sure you've looked into that already. But here's the biggest question I have. 2 questions. One, why not on Thames Street versus the beach? And the second is, how much is this costing the city?
Okay. So the first question, why the beach? I think it's the best part of the city. I think that's to be shown, to show off the beach area. But I don't, I think that we're pretty. Myself, I'm open to really having it anywhere in the city. I think I don't know, Ron, if you or Jill want to,
Part of why we looked at Eastern Point is also because there has been 5Ks run out of there. There was an established route. This is a little bit of a different route to cut it down to just a 5K. Police-wise, it's the easiest way to close off roads in the city. It impacts the least number of people. It doesn't impact major roads with the exception of 349, and honestly, on a Saturday, it's not that bad. So safety-wise, it's probably the safest route. And Eastern Point Beach is really our gem. I mean, it's a beautiful area to be able to put the beer garden when you are coming into the beach. We're looking at putting the beer garden on your right-hand side there where there's the open green space, putting the band on the porch of the Tyler house, or of the Zabersky house, and then having the food trucks there by the water. It's a beautiful site for people to see. It's a great way to introduce people who may have never been to the city into the city, and it provides space that's safe. And it also is a little bit more, if we're gonna have alcohol, to have it be in an area that is a little bit more isolated versus Washington Park. There's a lot of people playing there all day, every day. So that could be good or bad. But for this first event, we're looking at at doing it at at Eastern Point Beach for those reasons.
And when I was approached, because we talked about Thames Street, but for this to be our walk before we run, right, to get our feet established and those kind of things. Let's do this, let's get this established. Once we work out the logistics of it, then we get the police to do an op plan, and we can expand it and do a historic run down on Thames Street, right? You can do it along the river, you can see the river, you can see the history with the monument and with the historic houses and those kind of things. That, like whenever Councilor Carter was talking about for the future, this is not a one and only run. This is the first run of what we hope will be many. And the future runs may be associated with adult beverages, and they may not. They just may be a 5K. And so, I don't know if that answers your
Yes, it
question,
does.
but it gives you it gives us all some additional information to think about.
So do we know how much it's costing the city?
No, but I will say that the money raised, like we will be selling sponsorships and such, and so that money will go towards expenses before the chamber saw any of it. So we would make sure that all the expenses were covered before the chamber took any money.
Including police work?
I haven't seen a budget yet.
That's a lot of overtime if you have
It is.
somebody. I just wanted to add on to what he was saying.
Well-
It just goes back to what I was saying with what is the city, like the proceeds, where are they gonna come from? Who's gonna proceeds, you know?
Well-
So if we're like getting out, it'd be good to see just something where it would go, maybe some monies go to like rec programs or something, you know, where it would show. Yeah, I mean, it's I'm all for it, but what we don't want is to utilize our beautiful beach for some type of profit, and we don't get anything out of it, you know. So that's all I would think somebody would ask who's from the city, like, we're paying for some, what are we going to be getting?
Well, first of all, I don't know how much we're gonna make out of this once you're done. So we don't know what that is. That's the first thing.
It's gonna be a lot.
Okay, well, if there's gonna be a lot, then we can get some. But second of all, we have money set aside in our budgets for things like op sale and other events that we don't get anything back from. Right? We do.
That's
We
different,
have,
though.
we have items in the budget
No, I know
for
that.
police support that we don't always get things back
No,
from.
but that's different.
That doesn't mean that we can't get some form of reimbursement to either for that or for another program in the city that supports the city and we get benefit from it.
Yeah, I'm not saying that we should get, we're not going to make, I'm not expecting that. I'm just saying that we're giving out something, and if the proceeds go strictly to the chamber, right, which primarily doesn't support the city.
Understand, the city
We
should-
should at least get something
Yep.
we have, that's all.
Absolutely,
yeah.
and that is not, we are still in the discussion stage. We've not got there. Like I said, this is the first step. Councilor Norris.
Please don't get me wrong. I think it's a great idea. I kind of do this stuff for a living, so that's why I'm asking all these questions. I am not saying that the city should not cover the costs or anything like that. I'm just saying, as a taxpayer, I'm all for it, but let me know what the budget is and what the city's paying versus, I don't even care about the revenue side, just what are we as taxpayers covering off there. It's a great idea, it's a great program, it's going to be successful, there's going to be many years to come. You guys are going to be doing this for another 25 years, so kudos, but I just wanted to make that
Thank you,
a point.
Councilor Norris. And I would say that, this is an opportunity. I'm new to the chamber, and like I said, that the Groton Business Association was merged with the Mystic Chamber, and I think in the last few years, we've been negligent in including Groton and reaching outside of Mystic. And this is an opportunity to start those discussions and start something that's real and that will showcase the Groton, all over Groton, and not just Mystic. And the chamber is a community, business-driven, organization that it really should have the community and businesses first and foremost. And so that's the direction we're trying to take it. And this is one of the steps that we're doing it, and I really appreciate Groton Utilities and coming up with the idea and giving us the opportunity to be involved. So, as we move along and as the plans, develop, I think the comments that you guys are making, hit us hard, and they need to be considered. And if there's things that we can do or things that come out of it, I'm very open.
And since Bruce has been executive director, Mr. Peanut came here, and the Oscar Mayer Wienermobile was here, right? We had that out front. Let me tell you something, it was family COVID friendly, and the kids they came in by, there were more kids you could take a stick at out there. There was a lot of kids very happy, getting peanuts, getting whistles, and getting their pictures taken. And so already we've demonstrated, or Bruce has demonstrated, to develop a relationship with the city of Groton. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Mayor.
Other questions? Councilor Piazza.
I just had one question. So this is not age restricted, it's wide open to all ages? Because we're looking at a brew fest, and so.
It is.
We're talking about the Oscar Mayer Mobile and the peanut. I'm assuming that would be incorporated in what children would be able to do if it's open to all ages.
Yeah, I think we need to talk about, I was thinking at the last meeting but didn't say anything, but maybe there'll be a kids run before, but yeah, I think that's all going to be developed. But from our standpoint, we're inviting families to partake and watch the music, and if there's kids or people under 18 who want to, or under 21 that want to run, I would say they would.
I think it'd be a great idea to open it up, because speaking with people before I came on council, is a lot of people in the city always discuss with me when we talk about Groton, but one of the big things that's come up is there's nothing for the teens.
Mm-hmm.
So this would be great if it's open to them and
Yeah.
have something for them afterwards or beforehand.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments from the council? Okay, I need a motion to move this to the mayor and council meeting of June 7th, 2021.
So moved.
Second?
We have a motion, a second, further discussion? Seeing none, all in
Well-
favor?
I don't know, so are we gonna get like the budget and all that kind of stuff, or are we gonna?
Yeah, I was gonna ask, is this an update or is this a?
Okay, then what do we want to do with this? Do we not want to move it now?
So at this point, you won't get a budget for a while. What we are asking of you right now is to allow alcohol on the beach that one day. Because without that, we can't move forward with any
I
planning.
got you.
But we can definitely come back with a budget at a future date with more information.
Yeah.
Thank you for the clarification.
I mean, the
Which need
reason
to further.
their ask is for the resolution to allow
That
alcohol
makes it
on the
clear.
beach. That's the ask.
Yes. And then you're gonna come back because we have to get
We have to-
approval because Groton Utilities is
Yep.
funding it, so we have to hold another,
Yep,
yeah, I got you.
Yeah, that was going to be my point. This is moving the Fall Fest, which is one of the signature events that Groton Utilities sponsors, to the order of magnitude of $10,000. So that's ratepayer money to be Groton-centric and to do anything we can do for the good of the city. So that's the purpose of it. We don't have a budget. Everything is very preliminary, but we know without this first step, we can't talk and figure this all out. And my head keeps going. This year, the idea was to walk before we run. We don't know how many people. We don't know the cost. We're trying to think of what runners always want something. They want a T-shirt or they want something to take away. For 4 years, I've been trying to figure out how to get, I've been doing brew runs with my family growing up forever, and I said, we got to do this in the city. We've got to do this here. How do we get there? So I couldn't figure out how to do it just as the utility or as the city. So we're leveraging some very experienced people that have a lot of really smart people to figure out how to help us bring it here. And you can ask me, you can ask Dan, or we have everybody very involved in this.
so I recognize that we owe you some deliverables, costs of the police, the return of this to the city of Groton. What does that mean? What does that look like? Is that financial? Is that another way? But what is the return to the city on this? So basically, what is the city getting out of this? and what is the cost to us? And you'll get that as we get closer and as we get it. I don't have it yet. I haven't seen the op plan or anything yet, so. But the police will be doing that. Any further discussion on this? Okay, hearing none. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention? Motion carries. Okay, the next thing is number 3. That is, thank you, Bruce. 655, Department Presentations, Economic Development Grant Program. Sierra, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, good evening, everyone. And for Christine Plaza, hi, this is my first time meeting and presenting to you, so just hello. So in your package, you received the City of Groton's Business Soft Cost Grant. So what our department is looking at is actually expanding this grant. Currently, it covers things like architecture fees, survey and soil science, and also engineering and some legal fees for new and expanding businesses in the city of Groton. We would like to include a minor facade improvement element to the grant program to cover things such as storefront signage, facade painting, any masonry repairs, awnings. Can you hear me now? Okay. Awnings, gutters, different things that really face the streetscape of the property, and different ways that we can work with businesses to, especially brick and mortars at this time, to kind of help them make their improvements and get more people in the door. So we are requesting that extension, and we would be moving forward to the June 7th mayor and council meeting, and presenting a resolution to you between now and then.
Questions from the council? Councilor Schiff.
Do we need to look for contractors, I guess, for any work that is going to be done on these areas in front of, businesses and so forth? Are we going to be?
We wouldn't work with, we wouldn't be looking for the contractors. It would be up to the business and property owners to do that work. They would work with us on the design and exactly what expenses are going to get covered.
Okay, but it'll be out of their pocket if for any type of change that they choose to make.
Yes, the way the business soft cost grant is currently set up, it is a reimbursement. So, yeah, they'll do the work first and they'll apply to us.
But it would need to be approved to make sure that,
yeah.
that that it meets the requirements of the grant process. Right, so we're not gonna get into the choosing of the contractor. The business owner would need to come to us and get that. Okay. Councilor Piazza?
Yes, I did read through this, and the only question, I might have missed it, it might be in here, but I was just wondering how many businesses with this grant would it be able to help?
Currently, our programming allows up to 5 businesses are able to get help a year.
Okay. Questions from other councilors? Councilor Norris?
I'm sorry, full of questions tonight. So, is this a new program? How long has this been going?
So the Business Soft Cross program has been going on since, I believe, 2018.
Okay. Where does the money come from? The $5,000, is that a general fund item? Is it coming from?
It is a general fund item, yes.
Yep, we funded
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's in the budget.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the last question I have is, I understand what you can use the money for, and it says not limited to. So I'm wondering, can a business use some of this for marketing and advertising purposes?
No, that wouldn't be a approved, an eligible cost expense. Unless you're including like the storefront signage, that's more like of a marketing thing-ish, but it doesn't specifically address marketing and advertising.
Okay, thank you.
So
Councilor
it's primarily structural?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Other comments or questions from the council? Okay, hearing none, I'd like to have a motion to move this to the mayor and council meeting of June 7th.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. Thank you, Sierra.
Thank you.
Okay, the next one will be 742, Groton Utilities. And we will start with the budgets. We'll start with the electric budget first. I think, well, a month ago or so ago, we gave you the budgets, and then today, we sent you the link to the Groton Utility Commission meeting where these are discussed in detail. So if you had any, we will go into the detail that you need here, but sometimes at the Utility Commission meeting, there might be questions that are asked that you wouldn't think of. So we'll talk about the first one. The first one is going to be the Electric Division Utility. Ron, we'll turn it over to you.
Sure, thank you. And first, I'd like to thank E, who's actually online for this meeting, and the whole finance team, and all the GMs and everybody that put time into preparing these budgets. There's the amount of time that goes into these is astronomical, and a lot of thought and a lot of just energy goes into them during the budget season. So I just want to start off by thanking everybody that had involvement with putting these together. I'm just going to give you kind of a quick overview to start, and not so much dive right into one specific budget, but then we can go through if we want to go into that after. So for each of the utility line of business, the budget drivers, one, the revenue. That's the first piece of the budget, is to come up with the revenue. Unlike the general fund, it's built budget backwards, where your taxes is your last piece of the budget, and you go that way. So this one, we start with the revenue, the operating expenses for each division, and then the capital projects get factored in as to what the 5-year plan is and what they have projected for the next year. And then the bigger thing, again, which is a little bit different than the general fund, is the actual cash flow and what that looks like, as far as to make sure that each division does have enough cash on hand in order to operate. So those are kind of the process of putting these budgets together for each of the divisions. And then again, once the cash flow, if that does not work, we circle back, and usually the only thing that can be adjusted is operating expenses and capital projects, because your revenue is fixed based on the projection. The electric division transfers $4.1 million to the city general fund as a return to the city. That's been the same for the last few years now, so there was no change in that. By resolution, there could be a change based on the revenues or the earnings of the electric division. The additional cash and non-cash contributions are roughly $2.3 million for a total benefit of $6.4 from the utilities. And there's a page in the budget book that kind of breaks that out as to what those contributions are and the return to the city.
That's on page 5.
So what the point of that is to show you the good things that the utility does for the city, and providing it back. For the electric, water, and sewer division, there are costs that are allocated across the board. So that would be your IT, customer care, finance, admin, staff, similar to those. Those are allocated on a 60-30-10 split, 60% electric, 30% to the water, 10% to the sewer. Expenses that are specific to a division are just charged to that division. So the electric line guys are only charged the electric budget. They're not allocated across the board. But those expenses that do go across the board, that's how they are allocated. For the current year, we'll just kind of do a quick highlight of all the divisions from the revenue standpoint. The revenues developed for the electric using a historical usage over the last 3 years. We changed that last year from doing a 1-year look back to actually going back 3 years to get a better average, just to make sure we don't miss a spike or a valley, to just kind of average it out. It also took into effect the new rate as of 4/1/21, which, if you recall, it changed the rate structure a little bit, which had a decrease in the revenue of about 1% to 54.7 million. On the water side, we had the rate increase, and that is done the exact same way as electric, based on 3-year historical from the usage standpoint, times the projected rates with the effective on 10/1/2021, and that produced in a 3% increase in the total water revenue. The sewer, there has not been a rate increase since we implemented the sewer, and again, we did it based on a 3-year. This was the first time we had 3 years now to actually do that, and that resulted in a 2% decrease in the revenue, again, just based on the usage factor. From the operating and maintenance expense side, the electric division was pretty much flat, or a 1% increase for the operating and maintenance expense. The water operations, maintenance, and expense is down 7%, and the sewer operation and maintenance is about 2%. So across the board, there were pretty much flat budgets coming in, and then we'll go and when we look at the water, you'll see why there's a 7% decrease there based on a couple of things. Overview again, just of the capital project, you'll see all the detail in all of the budgets. For the electric division, there's 12.5 of bonded capital projects. 8 of that was for the transmission, which was just approved. And the remaining amount is old bond money that's still on hand that they're going to finish up some of the old projects. 5 million of non-bonded. This was part of the cost of service. When we just did that, the last one, it allowed us to utilize the rate stabilization fund and pretty much self-fund the $5 million of capital projects without having to go out and issue debt. And then the conservation fund capital projects is roughly $508,000, which was EV charging and LED upgrades and conversions. Water division bonded is 1.5 million. That's off of the new bond that was just authorized a few months back. And non-bonded is approximately 1.7. And what I mean by bonded is we've actually issued debt in order to do those projects, and it'll be paid back over 20 years. Non-bonded is actually cash that we have on hand to do these capital projects and stuff that we don't have to finance. The sewer division bonded, again, part of that bonding that we went through is about $995,000 for the current year, with non-bonded about $300,000. For the electric, then we get to the cash flow. After we go through all of that, we look at, like I said, the ending cash and see where we are with what the cost of service study recommends, and the operating earnings as well. So for the electric division, the proposed 2022 operating earnings is 4.3, which is right on target with the cost of service study. And then the cash balance, including the rate stabilization fund available, is about 16 million, where the cost of service study recommended minimum cash on hand is 4.2 million. So a little bit, about 2 million above what the cost of service minimum cash balance was recommended. For the water division, the proposed operating earnings is negative $4,000 with the cost of service targeted operating earnings of $826,000. So you'll see the operating earnings budgeted is below what was the cost of service operating. The proposed cash on hand, when all said and done, will be 7.2 million, as opposed to the cost of service recommended minimum cash balance of 5.9. So favorable, but as you're aware, the new water treatment plant will be coming online. So you're going to see, when you look at the budget, an increase in the depreciation and also in principal payments, because now the repayment of that drinking water loan is coming up. We'll have to start paying that back. For the sewer division, operating earnings of 506,000. The cost of service target is 763,000, so just a little bit below. And then the minimum cash balance, or the cash balance that we project on hand, will be 4.1 million versus the 1.8 million for the from the cost of service study. Again, that's something because we've had some favorable years with the sewer, and we've kind of been building up this reserve, so now we can start doing some capital projects, and that was the whole initial intent of moving it from the general fund to allow for some capital improvement. So this is kind of a quick overview of how the budgets are built, kind of where they are in relation to the cost of service study, and then we can go in And as the mayor pointed out, there's the first packet that you had in your budget handle was the function highlights. And if you go back to that utility commission meeting, all these pages get talked about in depth by the actual general manager who prepared it. So it has the expertise in it, and like the mayor said, with a lot of questions that were asked and answered through that process, so it may be very helpful. But we can take a quick look, and we'll start with the electric budget. Just to kind of walk you through so you can see now what we talked about in the highlights to the actual. The easiest page, the way that these budget books are all prepared the same way, there's a narrative talking about the different changes within the budget, some of the highlights throughout. Like I said, on page 4 is a comparison where our current rates are versus our benchmarks to give you an idea of where the rates are. Page 5 talks about the contributions to the city, the 6.4 that we talked about, and gives it in a lot more detail as to where that came from. Page 6 is the operating revenues. 7 is the expenses. And again, these are kind of summarized by different, by payroll and then by other for each of the divisions. And then page 8 gets you to the other income and expenses down to the total net earning number. Page 9 is the cash flow. And the page that we'll look at, because it kind of takes all of those pages and sums them up into a nice little pro forma, which is page 10. So if we go through this, so on this one here, you'll see the column all the way to the right is just the variance or the change from the 2022 to the 2021 budget. The one column to the left is a proposed fiscal 22 budget, and then the one to the left of that is the approved 21 budget, and then some projection actual numbers over to the left of that. So the 3 columns on all the way to the right are the ones that we'll kind of focus on. As I talked about when we were going through the narratives, you can see total electric revenues from the 2021 was roughly just over 48 million down to 46.7 or down 1.5. Again, that's based on the rate restructure that we did with the last cost of service. The total operating expenses budget in 2021 were just over 52 million, now just under 51 or a reduction of 1.6. So what you'll see there is in that purchase power line, that's where the deduction is, or the offset of that revenue loss. Which brings you down to your operating earnings of just over 3 million for last year to up to 4.2 million or 1.1 change. So that's just it was just a shift when we did that last cost of service of how those revenues were in there. It flows down to the summary of the other income and expenses. You'll see an increase there of about 500,000. So the total net earnings of the electric for the budget is just over 4 million, where last year it was 2.4 million. So the net earnings is projected to be up from the previous year. Then we go into the cash flow, and again, as we build the budget, this is kind of the last piece that we do. However, it's the most important to make sure we can run the businesses effectively. See, there's a small increase of 226 in depreciation, again, just for new assets and capital projects that have been put onto the books. Receipt of bond funds, which was an increase of 5.5. We did not, even though we had budgeted 2.5 last year, that got all put on hold with COVID. And then with the cost of service restructure, it turned out we did not need to do that. However, there is 8 million. What that 8 million is part of the 15.2 from the transmission project that was approved. That we will be getting credit for. You see total capital projects is about 18 million with the principal bond payments back at 2.1 and 1.8. So our total cash flow from operations, we're projected to use 7.7 million in the current year. Total cash on hand is just over 17 million as of June 30th projection, which would bring us down to 9.5. This does not include the portion of the rate stabilization fund, that CMEC, that we can utilize as well, which brings the cash balance back up to that $17 million number, which was kind of a change in the last cost of service. So that's kind of like a very high view of the electric budget and kind of hitting through the different ones. And like I said, this is a very good page to look at because it kind of gives you the whole picture from the revenue, expenses, and then actually the cash flow. If you, on page 11, this is the list of the capital projects that are proposed for the current year. There's the 5.2 of non-bonded, 12.4 of bonded. Again, 8 million for the transmission. The remaining piece of that is for just bonds that we've already issued that we're going to complete those projects. And then some capital projects that are funded through the conservation funds.
Any questions on electric? Deputy Mayor Depot.
I think the biggest thing that I didn't understand about the utility budgets until I was on the council is why do we bond money when we have cash on hand? Can you do like, I know that's a complicated thing, but can you do like a quick explanation of why we do that?
Yeah, I mean, so this year, like we talked about, because the cash on hand was above where the cost of service is recommended minimum cash balance, because we're required to keep, what that does say, how many days cash on hand do you have in order, if revenues don't come in, how long can your business run, essentially. So we look at how much cash there is there enough where we can fund it out of the cash that we have, which is the non-bonded piece? Or if we feel that that's gonna bring our cash balance down too low and below that minimum cash balance, we will issue bonds in order to not use up cash in the checkbook. So, I mean, it's a tricky balance. If in a perfect world, we'd all love to just use cash on hand and non-bonded. Unfortunately, we'll use a transmission project, for example. That's projected to be a $15.2 million project. So for us to fund that, we don't even it would use all the cash that we have, and we wouldn't be able to do anything else.
The other thing that we're trying to do with all of our plants is with the cost of service studies that we're doing, we're trying to maintain our plants at 50% net value. Okay, that's a rule of thumb that they're using across the board that the United States uses, and so in the industry. So what that requires is a certain amount of capital spend in order to make sure that your infrastructure is up to date and those kind of things, and that's why sometimes the long-term bonding is a good thing, so that we can make sure that we're keeping our infrastructure up to date. One of the things that the utilities does not have a debt-to-equity ratio requirement like the city does. So the city has a limit on how much debt we can have, bonded debt.
Right, that's based on state statute. There's debt limitations
Right.
for the general government, and sewer still does have the restriction. So
And
electric and water
I was
do
gonna go
not.
into that. So electric and water doesn't have that restriction. If you go into the Connecticut General Statute, when it talks about the Water Pollution Control Authority, sewer debt does get tied to the municipal debt, and therefore there is a separate debt. First of all, it ties into the overall debt ratio, but secondly, there is a separate sewer debt ratio that we can have for the city. So that is one thing that we're keeping our eye on as well, because for sewer, not true, for electric and water, debt is not necessarily a bad thing, because that means you're keeping up with your infrastructure, and most of the things that you're capitalizing have a life of 20 years or more. So that makes sense. Any other questions on electric? Sorry, Councilor Norris.
General question. First, thank you. I love numbers, and you did a great job putting these numbers together in your team. But I also have to admit, your narrative is fabulous.
And I will thank E for putting that together.
The narrative is fabulous, so thank you for that. My question is, your cash on hand, is there a policy that Groton Utilities has that says X percent or X dollars need to be cash on hand?
I don't think we have a specific policy. We always compare ourselves to kind of the recommended industry, but I don't think we have a policy per se that says we need to keep X amount.
Okay, thank you.
So we do not have a written policy. That came from cost of service, right? Recommended based on, so when he comes in and does our cost of service study, he is basing it off of industry standards, am I correct? Do you want to address that or just leave it as is? Because I want to make sure the council gets their questions answered. I want to make sure that, I mean, I've been briefed a bunch of times. These are similar questions I had,
Well,
is
one
why
of-
do we do this?
Yeah, currently, there's no specific policy, but one of the things that came up in the utilities strategic plan was that the finance group wanted to come and start putting the brackets around what would be an appropriate cost, cash on hand to have. Typically, a utility can sneeze $5 or $10 million, especially an electric company. So having $15 million may sound like a lot, and in the municipal environment, you have to be able to create the discipline so that council such as yourself realize that you've got to have deep pockets on a really bad day. And so there is a goal in the new strategic plan. One of the very specific items on it for the finance group is to try to come up and work with the commission to develop a cash on hand policy. The trick is that it will be different for sewer, water, and electric, and we haven't been able to figure out exactly how to bring those together. Plus, the electric company also has the rate stabilization funds at CMEC with additional funds. So how do you blend that in? This is the first year that we were able, in the cost service study process, to take a view of how to look at the rate stabilization funds as part of our cash on hand.
So just coming from our COVID experience, there was a policy that was put into place last year by the town council that impacted the town and the city and the utility for collections, right? And so, as luck would have it, our collection rate, I think the max we were at was a little bit over 7, between 7 and 10% collection rate. But it could have been worse, and if it would have been worse, then we wouldn't have had the revenue, but we would have still had our expenses. And so therefore, we need X amount of cash on hand. I don't know, do anybody know what our, like a monthly burn rate or a weekly burn rate is? Anybody have that off the top of their head by any chance? I haven't asked for it before, so you might not have that.
We can get that for you. I mean, it's
gonna be high.
yeah.
I mean, the number's gonna sound high to the council, because we're not used to seeing that large a number on what our burn rate is. But that's one. Go ahead.
Well, I'm just pleased that we have some really smart people working on this for the city.
Yep, absolutely. Any other questions on electric? Councilor Piazza.
This may be a simple question, or maybe it doesn't make any sense, but I read through it and made me kind of think about nursing when I try to explain things to people. I'm like, yikes, I was on Google a lot trying to understand this and learn it. But one of the things I did notice when looking at the budget, before I came on council, I read the budget, and I noticed a lot of the budgets had usually a 10% contingency. This one had a 25%. It may be a simple question. I was just wondering if that's because electric tends to have more contingencies and more.
Where are you looking at? Just
Am
so
I in the
can
wrong one? Groton Utilities Commission, is that wrong? Am I in the wrong one?
Well, are you talking about for a specific project?
It says
Or-
that the spend amount is 571,000. Is that something totally different?
Transmission.
Yeah, that's the transmission
Okay.
resolution,
Oh,
I believe.
okay.
Because that
So
was
that's-
So my error.
Nope.
No,
You have the right question just early.
Okay.
because
Nope,
actually
that is a very good question. It's been asked before. Before it got to you, it's been asked and answered, but we'll get to that.
Perfect.
So keep that question on.
Thank you.
On deck. Any other question on the electric budget that was just briefed?
And again, I know there's a lot of information that we're putting out there, so if you do take, and you look at it and a question does come up, please feel free to email to the mayor's office so we can get it answered.
Absolutely, and one of the things that I'll do, I don't know that you know this or not, but I'm trying to make sure that it's been said and that we follow it, is when one counselor asks a question, if it comes through us, that way I can make sure all the counselors get the answer, right? Because all counselors probably have a similar question, but it's more important to me that all the counselors have the same information so that no one counselor has information the other counselors don't have. That way you can all make balanced decisions on whatever we're bringing in front of you. Counselor Piazza.
I was just going to say, in understanding it, do you offer courses at all?
We could
For the public or somebody, or the counselors
we've
to,
never really done
somebody
anything
train
for
a
the
little bit in
public,
it?
but if there's
I would
something
definitely
that-
take it, trust
If
me.
there's something that you want to sit down and have questions, we can go through, or just like the budget process, how it's developed and all that in quite a
Perfect.
more detail, absolutely.
Well, in the past, Deputy Mayor Beckford, right?
Yep.
Jamal sat down with you because he had a couple questions about, one, process, two, some of the specifics, because he was familiar with budgets. And if you have questions, please feel free to contact Ron, and he can walk you through, one, specifics, but two, how the budgets are constructed and those kind of things. There's a lot of time and energy spent in this. It's not just a couple people getting in a back room throwing numbers together. So, I mean, and one of the things that we're trying to do, one of my frustrations when I first got here was, okay, we have a budget, and then at the end of the year, we're done. Do we go back and look at what we budgeted versus what we got done to compare to see if what we said we were gonna get done, we really got done? We're still moving in that direction. So the budget, it's important to me that when we put a budget together, that the budget means something, right? You're not just spending money. As long as you don't overspend, you're okay. It's what are you spending the money on? What is it getting you? What is it doing for the ratepayer when you come to the Groton Utilities budget? And what are we doing for infrastructure? Where are we moving? You know, because if you think about the municipality and utility, the utility is a business. So the utility needs to think like a business, even though it is municipally owned. The municipality, there could be arguments that you can't run a municipality like a business, and we get into those discussions. But I think many principles and tenets of business can be used for the municipality when you talk about discipline and structure and spending other people's money, those kind of things. So, any other questions on the electric budget for the utilities? Okay, hearing none, I need a motion to move this to the mayor and council meeting of June 7th, 2021.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstention, motion carries. Okay, water?
So this budget looks very similar to the electric, with the exception it doesn't have the return to the city. Water is not allowed to do that, so there's nothing in there from that steep, but it starts with the narrative. Our rates versus the benchmark, which is on page 3. The operating revenues 4, expenses on 5, other income 6, cash flow 7. And again, similar to what we did for the electric, we'll go to the pro forma, which is page 8. So as discussed in the overview, the revenue based on 3-year historical and the new rate structure is budgeted at 11.4 million, up 357,000 from prior 2021 budget. When we get down to the operating expenses, there's an increase from 11.1 to 11.4, 347,000. As you can see in the numbers above that, there's a decrease in the operating expenses of 728,000. However, with the new plant going into service, the $54 million plant, that was why there's a huge increase in the depreciation, because that'll be online and start the depreciation process. So with that, we looked at the operating expenses to try to figure out where we could make some cuts to try to keep it neutral. Go down to the net earnings. You see that the prior year's budget was 2 million. With this year's proposed negative of 757,000, or a 2.7 million, $2.8 million change. There was a couple of things that led that. One is in the prior year, there was the grant for the drinking water of, I believe it was roughly 3 million. So that was the big piece. That revenue was no longer there. We received all that grant. However, we did remove the interconnect of 1.2 that was in the previous year's budget, and that's just in the cash flow of the million. So that led to the $2 million change roughly was the interconnect of the 1.2, which the interconnect, just because, counselors, is part of the agreement that we have with the state we received a loan for 54 million, then we subsequently received a grant of 15 million. Part of receiving that grant was to do interconnects with surrounding territory. So this 1.2 million is to connect into Preston. It's Preston, right, Ron?
Is that the one across Paquatonic, right?
Yeah.
So the last interconnect takes us across the Paquatonic Cove over into the Mohegan Sun. In order to get the grant, it was a $50 million grant, we had 5 interconnect agreements that we had to sign and execute. And so we're finishing the final one. What the interconnects do is, one, it allows us to expand, but more importantly, from a DPH point of view, it gives the region resiliency, because we have large watersheds, 2, we have deep aquifers, and so we are drought tolerant and drought resistant. When other people earlier this year, or last year rather, and the year before, when they were down in the 40s and 50s, we were averaging around high 70s. So what the interconnects do is it allows resiliency throughout the region. It also gives us opportunity for additional revenue. Now, the revenue in water, as in with sewer, and we'll find out in a minute, can only go into water. The electric is the only one that can make a profit. Everything else, the other two accounts, the money has to be used in those accounts only. So please continue.
So then, with that being said, it takes us into the cash flow, and you'll see some significant changes in there when we look from budget to budget. The biggest one, when we look, the receipts from bonding, again, we didn't issue the 1.4 in the previous year when COVID hit, so we are anticipating to issue, or use 3 million in the current year of bonding to issue. The next line down, a big decrease, which those are the receipts of the drinking water state revolving fund loan, where we had budgeted 8 million last year. There's no budget for it this year. In theory, all of those loan proceeds will have been received. Some may trickle over to the new year, just depending on it, but for budgeting purposes, we did not include that. Again, depreciation, the big increase which we saw up top under the operating expenses, because depreciation gets added back in the cash flow because it's a non-cash event. And then when we go down the water treatment project itself, we had $11 million budgeted, and in theory, there's nothing budgeted. Again, that kind of goes with the loan piece up above. So those are some big numbers that you'll see that are swing, one's money coming in, one's money going out. And then the other piece of it that you'll see I had a significant increase, which is two lines up from that water treatment project, which is a bond principal requirements. And as I stated before, that 1.9 million is because now with that loan that we have with the state, we're gonna need to start paying that back. So as we were doing construction of the plant, we were receiving funds from them, kind of like a construction loan, for lack of a better. So we would get reimbursed, and then now that the plant, once it's complete, we'll start paying that loan back. So that's why you'll see the increase in those bond principal payments going back.
Although these are large numbers, I do want to draw attention that this is a low-interest loan and not a bond.
At 2%.
At 2%.
So then, which brings us down to our net cash flow from operations. You'll see in budget 2021 was a reduction of 1.8, with the current proposed budget would have a reduction of 1.6, which would bring the cash from the 8.8 down to 7.1. So that's kind of a overview of the water. Again, similar to electric, on the next page, you will see the non-bonded capital projects that are proposed, which includes 500,000 for PCB removal and that interconnect of the 1 million. And then below that is the bonded capital, which you can see is the Brandegee tank engineering piece, and then some distribution and the low lift pump station work. So those are kind of just the list of the capital projects.
Any questions on water? Councilor Piazza.
When will the project be completed that you're speaking of, approximately?
Do you have a new update for that?
Should be right about July 1st, give or take.
Of this year?
Probably, yeah. It'll probably carry into the month of July.
It has slid a couple times. The original date was September of last year, then it moved to the spring of this year, then it moved to later spring, and then now it's in July. So there are a couple things. There's no increase in cost. It's delays in some of the testing and some of the fabrication. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's actually as they've tried to remove the piping and do, actually create the last part of the filters, the manganese contactors. They've had a hard time actually doing the modifications in the old side of the plant to do those modifications. So that work has gone particularly slow. And it should be all on the contractor.
This may be outside of the budget, and you can let me know if I should or should not ask this question. I was really interested in this PCB removal. I looked up a lot about it. And so when we actually do it, are we bringing the numbers just below what is required, or are we actually bringing it significantly lower? Or I don't think it's going to be zero, but.
The way they're doing it, and the mayor understands this probably even better than I do, because the operations manager has been explaining it ad nauseum, and they are involved day to day with the way that the EPA has approved the actions. We've used environmental partners. Environmental partners has come up with ways. We basically sandblast all of the old paint off. The cement behind it has residuals to a very low extent, and then it's actually sealed with new epoxy paint. If the residuals left in the cement is below a threshold number that's very, very, very low, it doesn't need to be sealed. It actually just gets painted.
Thank you.
The challenge that we had there is that the EPA had a standard, and the state standard was actually lower than the EPA standard, so therefore we had to meet the EPA standard. One of the challenges we had up front is that the method for removal and encapsulation was approved, and then they changed their mind and said, nope, we're not going to let you do that method anymore. We now want you to go down to 1 or less than 1. And so it has been expensive. But what is happening, and what's going to happen is that the transition from the new, so there were no PCBs in the new, but the transition into the old plant had to be completely remediated. And then we knew that in the old part, once the new construction is done and the tie-in's complete, we knew that there were going to be portions of the old plant that had PCBs. And so the EPA said, you need a plan to do that. We originally were going to do a long-term plan. They said, nope, 20 years is too long. So we said, okay, fine, we'll do a 5-year plan. And then we did we had a study that identified that we could actually get it done in a couple of years. And what we're looking at doing now is spend $500,000, right, for this year?
This should be the final year that we have PCB removal for the water treatment plant in the budget. You saw it in your budget, so it's actually a timely, pointed question. In the last council meeting, you approved a purchase order for environmental partners to help us do the EPA approval of the final plan. In a meeting very, very, very soon, you're going to get the next purchase order request, which is to a PCB abatement company that's going to do the work. We're going to try to carry the same company that's doing the work for R.H. White into us to use the ability not to be able to stage up for the job and use someone new to learn, use the same contractor just to finish as the plant is coming online.
So the intent is to spend the $500,000 this year and be totally complete in PCB remediation in the water treatment plant, old and new. Because one of the things that we tried to do was, we knew there was a room that we would never need to access. So we tried to get permission to close the door, weld the door, lock the door shut, then weld it, because we knew we were never going to get access. And EPA said, nope, you got to totally remediate it too. So once we're done with this portion of the remediation, we will be completely done with PCBs associated with the water treatment plant. And then at a later date, we will come to you about PCB, because we know we have some PCBs at the sewer plant. And so that'll be a whole different plan later on. We haven't started addressing that yet, but we will be coming to council with a plan. We want to get through the water thing first, and then we'll leverage our experience off of that to take a look at the PCBs in the sewer plant. Any other questions on water? Okay. Did I get my motion? I didn't get the motion. Okay. So I need a motion to move this to the mayor and council meeting of June 7th.
So moved, Honorable Mayor.
Okay.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Abstention? Motion carries. Okay, sewer?
So again, sewer's built exactly like water, so I won't go through all the steps and the pages. We'll just flip right to page 8. Which again, this is the pro forma page. You can see the total sewer revenues decreased. Again, this is based on historical usage now that we had the 3-year. So that dropped from the 4.3 to 4.2, or 100,000. Operating expenses were pretty much level. Went from 3.7 million up to 3.75, or a $70,000 increase. The net earnings from the 2021 budget of 413, with the new budget is 308,000, or a decrease of 104, as you can see, mainly driven by the decrease in the revenues. In the current cash flow, we go down. Same thing with the bond funds. Didn't issue last year, again with COVID, but the plan is to issue debt based on the approved bonding that took place a few months back. A minimal change in depreciation, and then an increase in capital projects from just over $1 million to $1.3 million, or a $279,000 increase. So cash flows from sewer in the previous year were about 256 to the positive. The current year budget is 122,000 negative, bringing the cash from 4.1 down to just under 4 million. And then again, the next page shows you the non-bonded capital projects that are included in here, as well as what they plan for the bonded. So pretty much a flat budget with the exception of taking that 3-year historical.
So one of the things I want to talk about real quick about the sewer budget, and I'm going to talk about it until people finally understand it, is the reason that we took the sewer out of the tax base is so that we can do capital projects, and so that we can have cash on hand and the ability to bond and have grants. One of the things we're doing now, we have a study now that is going to prioritize projects that need to be done in addition to the 5-year projects that we have identified. So what this does is it now allows us to focus on capital projects and to fix capital projects, whereas before, any capital project repairs were based on what was it going to do to the tax base. And in our tax base right now, $1 million is 1 mil. So a lot of times, people look, are you gonna raise taxes to fix long-term? Or are you gonna wait until it gets big enough and bad enough, and then we'll do a large bond, which is what we did the last time. But also, if you remember back in 2017, it's when we had the digester explosion, and we ended up repairing that with insurance money. So the good news is it got repaired by insurance money. The bad news is our premiums went up. So this is why one of the reasons that I did what we did in order to move this so that we can now focus on our capital projects. The other thing, when we're talking about inspection and lining of the sewer pipes, is that now we know that when we get a heavy storm, we have cracks, the pipes, they're not pressurized, but what happens is, so they're not leaking sewage everywhere. What happens is the water comes in and you get water infiltration and goes into the sewer, and therefore it goes into the sewer plant. We're currently at 64.7 or 67.4% capacity, somewhere along in there. When we have heavy storms, the water then comes in, that's extra work that the plant has to do. It also increases our capacity and it stresses the plant, and the plant, because it's fresh water, doesn't remove as much nitrogen. And so therefore, what we've done so far at the end of the year, we get money back from the nitrogen credits, but this takes take nitrogen away from it, so we're not able to remove as much nitrogen. The reason I tell you that story is because when you look at sea level rise, there's a projected sea level rise of 20 inches in 30 years. So we need to start taking the action now so that we don't have a problem, because some of these pipes are in areas, low level areas, that would be flooded. And if they're flooded, if you know that water comes in when it rains, if it's immersed, it's going to be continual water that comes in, and that impacts our capacity and our ability, impacts the capacity of the plant, and it impacts the capability of the plant to do its job to remove the nitrogen. So that's why we're trying to do what we're doing, and we're trying to do it now to get ahead of it. Does that kind of make sense? Okay. Any questions on the sewer budget? Seeing none, I'll take a motion to move this to the mayor and council meeting of June 7th, 2021.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstention, motion carries. Okay, thank you, Ron, for explaining the budgets. Now, the next item is Springbrook. If you go into 742, you will see an item for the annual Springbrook maintenance, 742. Okay, so who wants to, you want to go ahead?
This could be either of us, because it's actually Springbrook is the financial software that's used for across all the departments in the city. It does payroll and everything else. The utility does pay for the upkeep, maintenance, and this is the annual purchase order for those services.
Any questions on Springbrook? Councilor Norris.
I can get away with these questions. I'm new. Do you have any idea how long we've been using Springbrook?
2005? I think 2005.
Okay.
It's somewhere in that area.
Is this 62,020 higher than last year or the year before?
What was it, 2%?
Okay.
It was a 2 or 3%,
Yep, that's
I
fine.
believe.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments on this? Okay, hearing none, I'll take a motion to move this to the mayor and council meeting of June 7th, 2021.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstention, motion carried. Okay, BHI Energy T&D Services.
This project is actually to go to design for the Buddington substation high voltage side that's going to be taking the new higher voltage in from the new transmission lines that we're putting in. This purchase order has a request for 20 to 30% contingency because the actual definition of what the deliverable is not as well defined as it can be on some projects, and this is very typical as a distribution project. And actually, one of the things that the engineering manager pointed out was that ISO has a process that comes up with that should be, and typically these projects are carrying 20 to 30% contingency. So it is a particularly high contingency. So this is the design work for the substation.
What you typically see in response to your question that you asked before is typically our contingency is set aside at 10%. If we go above 10%, I encourage you to always ask, why is that? Because typically we do a 10% contingency. There is a reason now why they're doing the 25% because of the uncertainty. Councilor Sheffield.
Yes, I see the wording of the action. It's listed, written as 10%, but in parentheses saying 25.
Yeah,
so
I noticed
we
it. I
have
noticed that too on the,
It was just a typo on the action item. In
Yeah.
the resolution that's attached, it does have the 25%.
right. So that was the action item that Randy submitted to get this through the commission, or get it on the agenda for the commission and through the commission. That type, I just saw that too. That typo wasn't caught before. Thank you.
And that is because it's normally 10%.
Yeah. Any other questions or comments? Councilor Piazza.
Could you just let me know what ISO stands for, please?
Independent system operator. The ISO actually regulates the transmission system.
Thank you.
You're right. We have lots of acronyms. Any other questions? Okay, hearing none, I need a motion to move this to Mayor and Council meeting of June 7, 2021.
So moved.
Second?
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention, motion carries. Okay, low lift intake screen.
One of the things that came through council maybe 6 months ago or so, last October, we had eels coming into the water filtration plant. In the old plant, the eels used to come in through the intake structure, come to the top of the sand filters. They would swim around on top of the sand filters. The water would go through the sand filters and get cleaned up. When the sand filters backwashed, the eels would backwash into the settling basins, and there was no issue. The new design plant, the instrumentation is so fine that as the eels come in, they would clog some of the smaller pipes. So it's a problem that the eels are actually getting into the plant. So we put through an unplanned project about a while ago to authorize an emergent project that would get to the point where we were preventing eels from getting into the new plant by this September. The goal is, I keep giving them August 15th the goal. Their goal is to get this up and online for September 1st. We contracted with, I believe this is being done by Wright Pierce, and they came up with a really good new setup on the intake structure. So it will actually have several pipes with big screens around the pipe in an air blast system that actually cleans all the debris out of the strainers as they go. The strainers will have 8-inch, 1/8 inch holes, and be able to treat up to 9 million gallons a day reliably as it goes through the air scouring sequence. And there'll actually be 2 intakes. So one intake can do the 9 million while the other one gets air scoured.
Questions on the low lift intake screen? Councilor Piazza. Nope, this is good.
I just
paying
wanted to know,
attention.
once the screens were actually placed in, how often do you see them needing to be replaced, or is that they're long-lasting?
They should not need to be replaced.
Okay.
The air scouring system should actually clean the screens off every time they get blasted to be as new. I believe they're stainless steel or an endurable metal. Their plan is not to replace them. If I find out different, I will get back to the mayor's office and
Well,
let you know.
I'm pretty sure when I talked to the guys who put this in, who were designing, talk about it, I think it's CRESS, corrosion resistant stainless steel. So, because it's gonna be, it's not in a saltwater environment, but it's kind of a brackish kind of environment, so it is exposed to elements. And so, the corrosion resistant steel, it's not pot metal, it's not regular steel that you gotta worry about rusting and those kind of things. And you have to worry about cathodic protection and because of dissimilar metal potentials and those kind of things. So,
So Ron Uhas just looked at the spec. It's 304 stainless.
okay.
Okay. And I just have one more question, because you were proposing a September 1st completion, and I know that the eel breeding season, I'm assuming, is in September, or something similar to that?
Right, they'll be back at the end of September.
Right, so the 1/8 inch holes, that will keep even the little ones, shall I say, from getting through also? Is that what they're hoping?
That is the plan.
Okay.
Councilor Sheffield.
Yes, yeah, to piggyback that question, this is preventing the eel from actually entering the system in the first place, or is it something you have to, if some get through, they get clear that?
No, the idea is to keep them out in the reservoir in the first place. And it's kind of amazing because you wonder how they get there. They have the ability to go up the water in the dam and up the dam.
Okay.
So they go.
We had we didn't get a direct brief from the eel whisperer, but the guy that is our expert on eels has briefed the guys. They talked to me and it's almost, how salmon swim upstream and they have ladders. These eels actually come up when the water's flowing down. They come up, and it's part of their migratory thing. Because one of the things I was looking at is if there was a way, one, to prevent that, or two, to isolate them into a given reservoir, then let's do that. If we knew that they migrated up, and then we could dam it off and have your screening system there, that way they didn't get into the terminal reservoir, which is Smith Lake, but that's not the way it works. So the other thing that we're trying to figure out is, we know that the migration is normal, but what we don't know is why are they coming to this thing? Is it the flow of the water from the suction? Because this plant is designed for 12 million gallons a day, but can effectively easily do 9 million gallons a day. So you're sucking a lot of water through. So is it the flow that they're attracted to, or is it the noise of the pumps? A rhythmic noise, is it a tonal? Because that's one of the questions I asked, is there a harmonic that we could put over somewhere else that they'd be attracted to that over here and not attracted there? And the expert said, no, it's just they're just there. So now you're gonna have this screen with small holes, 1/8 inch, 0.125 is the size, and then periodically what it'll do, and I'm not sure, I didn't get a brief on what the trigger mechanism is, but periodically this air blast system will, you put a blast of air in and it blows back through, and then whatever is on, eels or other debris that may get caught up, any green debris such as algae or any other any other organic growth, then gets blasted free and the screen's clear again, and then rinse and repeat on a given frequency. But I'm not sure if it's time-based, if it's differential pressure-based. I'm not sure what it's based on. I didn't get that in-depth a brief on it, or I would tell you that. Any other questions on low lift intake screen?
This one I get.
Okay. Go ahead. Councilor Carter.
I was just thinking a lot, I'd be interested if you knew if the reason why they designed it the way in the first place was for this very reason, But you said the natural way, before we changed it, the eel will wash off, correctly? Right, is that what you said?
That was just the old plant design. It had nothing to do with eels, the reason it was the way it was.
Well, we don't know that, though, I'm saying.
Well,
If somebody thought about it, like, hey, we're not gonna do this because,
well,
we're doing this, so,
I don't, to answer your question directly, I don't know that they overthought it. I think the eels were getting in, but because the eels were on top of the water going through the sand filter. See, we don't have a sand filter anymore. And we also don't have the settling tanks. Because what we're doing now is, they would add chemicals to create what's referred to as flock. And it's basically, larger materials that would then settle out. The philosophy of this plant, the way this plant's designed, is they actually pump air in through small diffusers, causing it's called deflocculation, to keep everything up, and then it goes through, eventually it goes through these manganese contactors, which what that does, they're charged and it removes the manganese from the water. There's also what they call GAC, granulated activated charcoal beds, which are 6 foot deep. And so the water's going through there. It organically removes contaminants, and it physically removes contaminants. So it's a physical filter, and it's an organic, it removes organic materials from the water.
yeah, so this is a custom like job that they're doing for us?
Yeah.
So we-
Oh, yeah. So, I mean, we had to spend money on design, and we had to figure out what was going on. I don't know, people could say, why didn't you know this beforehand? I don't know, we didn't figure it out, but I think we have it, well, we know what the issue is now. We're hopeful that this is going to resolve it, because if this doesn't resolve it, then we're going to have to figure something out. Because it would not be good if we got a $54 million plant that is shut down because of little eels. Right.
The Aquaseptance, the company that actually this purchase order is being issued to, puts very similar filters in the front of most of the new plants now. This is the accepted way of intake filtering. In the old days, they had traveling screens that would go up and down that had very large things, and it would keep large debris out, and then it would spray water and just flush that large debris to the side. This is the new technology that most plants are using.
I just want to say I love these designs. Easy for you to understand. I love that.
Okay, any other questions on the intake screen? All right, I'll take a motion to move this to the mayor and council meeting of June 7, 2021.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstention, motion carries. Okay, we're going to move to 561, which is Groton Utilities Financials. This is informing.
So we'll just go through these rather quickly because I'm sure you're tired of hearing me talk at this point. There really is nothing crazy to report, but we'll go through them like we normally do. So we'll start on page 6 for the electric division. Year-to-date actual revenue, line 19, is just over 41 million versus a budget of just under 41 million, or a variance of 432,000. As we've seen historically throughout the year, the residential and industrial are carrying the revenue side, with the commercial lagging behind. Row 37, operating expenses, just over 37 million versus a budget of just over 38 million, or 1.2 favorable year-to-date. Line 66, the net income before bond principal requirements is at 4.3 million versus a budget of 2.3 million, or just under $2 million favorable. So for the electric division, you'll see that we're, again, just a quick recap, over budget revenue, under budget expenses, which is leading to the net income that's favorable.
Questions on electric? Okay, water?
We'll flip to page 12. Line 17, total water revenue is 9.7 million versus a budget of 9.2, or $500,000 favorable. Above budget, again, same trend that we saw in the electric, that the residential and industrial are carrying the over budget revenue with the commercial under budget. Row 30, total operating expenses, 8.8 million versus a budget of 9.2, or just about a $500,000 variance below budget from the operating expenses. Row 48, the net earnings before the debt principal is just under 3 million at 2.97 versus a budget of 1.7, or again favorable to budget of 1.3 million, so very similar to the electric.
Questions on water? Okay, move on to sewer.
Flip to page 17. And we'll continue with the same trend from the revenue side. On line 15, the sewer revenue is 3.9 actual versus a budget of 3.6, 330,000 favorable. Again, residential and industrial over budget, with commercial lagging behind. Row 26, total operating expenses, 2.5 million versus a budget of 3 million, or 575,000, with a positive variance. Row 37, net income from operations is at 1.348 thousand versus the budget of 331,000, or just over $1 million favorable at year to date for the sewer.
Okay, questions on sewer? Okay, then we will move to, where am I? Move to 690, city budget presentations. This is Informant.
Very similar that we just went through. Again, this is our normal month-end report. When we look at all departments, there's really nothing of concern at this point. There's still some capital project stuff that's out there that hasn't been, which is why some of the departments are still more favorable than others. And then, like, as we've talked about, general insurance, it was a one-timer. We have one more. All those bills are paid, so therefore there'll be no change there. And same with the debt service. All the debt service has been paid year to date, so that's why that's only 0.14% left of the $500. But overall, from a general fund standpoint, there's no one department that looks to be out of line at this point.
And then we have the rest of this month and then all of next month.
Yeah, there's
And
two months.
that finishes out for the fiscal year. So Ron will be putting out Ron will be putting out an email soon to remind department heads to encumber money if they have not finished spending their money. Because this is a zero-based budget, so if you don't spend your money, then it goes back to the general fund. It does not automatically carry over. Ask the question, Councilor Norris.
So the contingency of 115,000, that's not being used and it's just going back to the general fund?
As of right now, that hasn't been touched. We will look at, I know one of the line items that we were talking about with contingency was the election, based on a primary and the normal election, that one of those was not budgeted. So we'll need to look at to see where budgets come in to see if we need to reallocate something to that. As of right now, we have not used any of the contingency.
If we have to do that, we come back to council?
Correct.
Okay, so if we have to use contingency, we will come back to council for that. But like Ron said, on election years, you typically budget for one election, not two, and we had two this year. Okay? Anything on? Okay.
Actually, before we move on, there's one more thing under
Oh,
city
yes.
budget, and this is a carryover from last Monday's meeting. I guess there was some questions on the refunding of the bonds, the refunding bonds that went through last week.
Yeah, there was Deputy Mayor Depot had a question.
So let me just, I guess I think the question may have
So,
been.
so the question was, what are we doing with the bonding? What are our cost savings? What is the breakdown for the bonds, right? Because we had bonds that were authorized, and that were authorized, that the council recently authorized. And then there were bonds that we were going to take advantage of the low interest rates to renew, for lack of a better term. And then that's where a potential cost savings would come in. So does that,
So I can give you a little bit more info on that. I did reach out. I've been going back and forth with our financial advisor who handles this process. And what triggered this was with the new debt issuance that was just approved. We were looking at potentially doing short-term borrowings or doing permanent bondings depending on how much money we needed. The short term is usually just 1 year. The costs to do that are less because you don't have to get rating agencies involved normally. However, with talking with Susan, once you get over a certain threshold, and I'm not 100% positive what that threshold is, even if you're doing a short-term borrowing, but say it's for 10 million, the bond ratings, the agencies still want to weigh in on that. So now, at that point, now you're doing a short-term borrowing, but you're paying the pretty much the same amount of not just doing a permanent funding. So it eliminates the point of doing a short-term. So when we decided that we were going to most likely do a permanent funding, what they always do, and periodically throughout the year, she'll reach out and say, you know, here's what the market's doing. There's potential for savings if we do a refunding. Does it make sense to just do a refunding? Maybe, maybe not, depending on the savings versus the cost of doing that. But seeing that we're doing the bonding, it makes sense to tie in any refundings that we can. What the proposal is to refund the 2009 bonds that were issued with tax exempt bonds. Because of the fact that they're over 10 years, they are callable now, so we can do a true refunding with non-taxable to refund those. The other one is a 2013 bond. Because we have not hit that 10-year period, that bond is not callable, so we cannot refund that with non-taxable bonds. However, we can fund it with taxable bonds. That market has been low, even though it's taxable usually runs a higher interest rate than a non-taxable, but it's still a better rate than where we're at, so it may make sense to do that, even though it's really kind of an out-of-the-box way to do it. We've seen that more common in the last year or so. So that would be to do it 2013 as a federally taxable. The potential savings, again, this all depends on when it sells and who bids on it. We're kind of just the projection right now is we're thinking 500,000 to 600,000 in savings for those two bonds total. But again, that's truly a projection. The taxable market's been fluctuating. It's every day it's kind of going against us, but we'll know once we issue and see where those savings are. But that's kind of the projection at this point based on preliminary, but I can't guarantee that it truly is on
and
the
that's
date of
over the
sale.
life of the bond?
Yeah.
Deputy Mayor Depot.
Thank you for always following up when I ask crazy questions. I just wanted to say, you know, I think we've talked about this with single budgets before, but all of these little areas where we can save money allows us to keep the budget flat, even though everything costs more every year. I don't think people realize that, like, insurance goes up 4% basically every year, so you have to build in that cost. So the only way to keep from increasing taxes 4% every year is to try to find cost savings in each department, or, you know, to me, this is a creative way to save tax dollars. And even though it's over the life of the bond, so it's, you know, annually, it's probably a very small amount, but every little part makes a big difference to be more thoughtful with our money if we can, so that we don't have to keep increasing taxes and we can keep our services available.
And one thing I do want to point out, this is total, and this does include electric, water, I believe there's a piece of sewer, and the general fund. I believe the big savings is going to be electric, who will have, because they have the bigger dollar amount.
They have the larger bond,
invested
the
with the
largest
bonds.
bond.
So it's not, I just want to make sure that but it's still saving ratepayers and everybody across the board, just depending on where it's issued.
Councilor Piazza.
I have a quick question, and when we're going back to when this all ends, the excess. So if you could give me an example, if there's excess, say, in fire, underneath public safety, what would they actually spend it on? Could we have an example on that?
So you're talking about back to the budget.
Yes, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let's just say at the end of the fiscal year, June 30th, if there's we'll just throw a number of $100,000 out there that was budgeted but not spent. That money goes back into the general fund. It goes away. So it'll go into the fund balance of the general fund, which I'm not sure, with this year's budget, we are using a surplus fund balance. So that's what created that surplus fund balance, is either more revenue collected than budgeted, with like building permits being an example. So we collected more revenue than what budgets, therefore there was excess that went into the fund balance. On the flip side, the opposite happens with the expenses. If they come in under budget, that reverts back in as well. So it goes into the fund balance and then it can be used to help offset taxes in the future.
Thank you.
So they don't get to just put it aside and say, okay, it's extra money, so I'll roll it over into next year's fund, it'll be found money, and I can do stuff. It goes back into the general fund.
Mr. Mayor?
Mayor, aye. Councilor McCabe.
Yes, and I have a question, I don't know I hope I say this right. The taxable bond, the 2013 bond that you are talking about, I guess, refinance might be the term. Are there fees associated with doing that kind of refinance? And since it's going to be non-taxable in 2 years, will this even out? Because I know we'll lower our, what we're paying now, but long-term, does it make sense?
So your question is, does it make more sense to wait the 2 years to go then? Or does the finance fees that we do a one-time for a larger amount save us, as opposed to finance fees now and finance fees then? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, or, right, does it make sense to wait 2 years?
Okay,
Would the savings be greater over time if we did that way?
understand. Ron, can you address that?
Yep. Let's, I guess, kind of maybe take a step back a little. As a municipality, our general obligations are considered non-taxable. Therefore, the person who purchases those bonds, it's tax exempt on their side, so therefore they pay a lower interest rate because it's offset by they're not taxed on it. As opposed to a taxable bond, the interest rates are a little bit higher because that person purchasing it, when they get their 1099 INT at the end of the year, they'll be paying taxes on that interest. So that's why the interest rate's usually a little bit higher on the taxable. But in order, like you said, to wait, we don't know what the market's gonna be in 2 years. So this is just the savings now. I don't know if that helped answer the question, but it's not like it's taxable bonds to the city per se, as far as we would have additional fees or anything like that. It's just that we would be paying a higher interest rate on that because the purchaser would be paying taxes.
But there's also cost for us to go issue bonds.
Correct.
So the rule of thumb in the past has been, if it's less than $750,000, doesn't make sense to go with a bond, go with a ban or something like that, right? But so you're gonna pay a certain amount for $1 million, but you'll pay a similar amount if it's $12 million. Is that close?
Yeah, when you start talking issuance costs, the cost to issue is going to be the same because it's your rating agency is going to be the same whether you're issuing for $1 or 10 million. Same with, your attorneys are writing the resolutions and bond counsel's involved with the whole process. So it's the same amount of work for them, and same with the financial advisor and all of that. It's really the same amount of work goes into it, no matter what the size is.
So sometimes there's a cost savings by issuing bonds once even though it's multiple bonds, as opposed to issuing now and then issuing later. Is that accurate?
Correct. If you recall, a few years back, we did a couple of short-term bans. One, it was to expedite, to get the money up front, and two, we weren't sure how much we really needed, and the last thing you want to do is bond something up front and then have excess left and over bond. It's like going and taking a loan out and then not using it and then paying back the principal and the interest. So if we're unsure of where we're at, we'll do it that way. And like the mayor said, usually if they're small enough, the fees are less to do a band issuance. But in this case, as we're going forward, based on the dollar amount, it's going to be the same whether we issue a band or a bond. So we're most likely just going to issue a bond. We'll relook at it next year as we need additional funds if we don't draw down enough. You know, it's going to kind of a moving target right now. And then we'll see, maybe next year we'll just issue a short term for stuff that we didn't issue this year to get us through the following year if the dollar amount's low enough. It's just, we're going to kind of need to see what the needs are, the operation at electric, water, and sewer, going through that process now to kind of put cash flows together so we can see how much money they need and when throughout the year they need it. So one, we're not borrowing 20 million in July to have them really need it next July and then sit on it. Or, so it's kind of a balancing act and to see what's in the best interest of everybody.
Councilor McCabe, did that address your concern?
Yeah, I think so. I think I have to process that a little bit.
Okay. If you have additional questions, please feel free to contact Ron, and he can address your concerns. Okay? Anything else on that? Okay, moving on. We'll go to 784, which is tax collector's suspense list. At your seat, you will see a new packet. The packet that you had in your counselor packet, only the odd numbered pages were copied, but we have a new packet that has the odd and the even numbers pages, so you have the entire packet of information in front of you from a suspense list. So Ron?
So we receive this every year from the town tax collector. This year's total that they're proposing to transfer from the active to the suspense list for taxes is just over $9,000. What this means, they're not writing it off and it's no longer collectible. That's not what they're doing here. They're just moving it because they've made numerous attempts to try to collect these taxes. And what you'll see is that most of them, you go through, they're kind of small amounts that add up. It's motor vehicle and personal property. Real estate's not on here because real estate can be liened. So therefore and have a tax sale. So usually real estate is very rarely put on the suspense list. So either personal property, the business went out of business, so there's nothing to collect, or motor vehicle, the person's moved and they've reached out numerous times to try to collect and they've been unsuccessful there. So they're just saying, let's just put them over here on the suspense list. However, if that individual does come back and tries to register a car and they get void because they have back taxes, this tax is still collectible. So we see every year when we get our report from the tax collector that some of the suspense listing is collected. So like I said, it's not written off and goes away, never to be looked at again. It can potentially be collected. It's just a way for them to clean up their records because they've made numerous attempts to try to collect these taxes and have been unsuccessful.
For example, if it's on the suspense list, and let's say somebody wants to come in and get a building permit, we go look at the suspense list and make sure, and then you can't get a building permit without bringing your taxes up to date. That happens.
Yeah, and you can see in this list too, like multiple billings, returned mail, deceased, and so they kind of put a little bit of the reasons as that they've made the attempt. It's not like they just sent the bill out the one time and then now they're saying let's just move it. So they have done their due diligence.
Okay, so I need a motion to move this to the mayor and council meeting of June 7th, 2021.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention, motion carries. A 773, that's the Parks and Rec. It's a memorial bench for Walter Conley. A couple things. We have 2 left. That'll bring us up to 40 at the beach, and that's Mary's Max that we have there. Now, we still could put benches in Washington Park and other places, but as far as the beach goes, they'll be done once you get 2 more for benches. Any questions on this? I need a motion to move this to mayor and council meeting of June 7th, 2021.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing
Yes,
none.
Mayor.
Go ahead.
I just want to say this, every once in a while you get to read something that makes you smile. And I've known Walter Conley for a good 30 years. And he was one of those individuals that made me smile, like 30 years ago, and he's still doing it today. So this is great.
Okay, perfect. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstention, motion carries. A city attorney, 785. Whoops, I didn't bring my charter. So, thank you. Page 17 of the charter says, "The mayor, with approval of the council by majority vote, shall within 30 days after the biennial election appoint a city attorney to serve until the next biennial election or until a successor can be appointed and qualified." So, we just got elected. Charter says, I'm bringing it to you. So we currently have Burcham and Moses, that is our attorneys, the firm that we have now. And so I'm bringing them to you to continue use of them at this time. Deputy Mayor Depot.
Is the city attorney something that we've ever gone out to bid or put like an RFP or anything?
Ron?
We didn't do a formal RFP when Bertram was selected. This was a result, it goes back to when we went to arbitration with the town over highway funds. Both the town and the city were using Sussman Shapiro, which then led to a conflict during the arbitration, which subsequently led to Sussman still representing the town, and we went and interviewed firms, and that's how, during that process, with Mayor Galbraith, and there was a few involved, we ended up selecting Bertram, and that's who we've had since that time. But we didn't go out like a full RFP or RFQ, request for qualifications.
Deputy Mayor Depot.
So my question is there something that they've done so superlatively well that we wouldn't compare them to anyone else at this
No,
point?
we could do that, and we could also talk to the department heads and see, how are you doing with them, and are you comfortable with them, and go from there. So that is something we could do.
Okay. I mean, I'm not saying that they're not. I don't have any negative anything, but I think that's a great idea, 'cause if the department heads interact with them to see what their reaction is or what their feeling is, because I know that would be a lot of work to go out to look for another attorney. And honestly, if our attorney, that's not something you want to probably keep changing, because we have experience, they know how we run things. It's probably best to keep it that way unless there's some kind of egregious reason we wouldn't. But I do think it'd be a good idea to check with the department heads just to make sure that there's no outlier and they go, actually, I had this bad, thing happen that I never mentioned. That might be good to just triple check.
Okay, we can do that. Any other question or comments on this? I need a motion to move this to June 7th, 2021?
So moved.
Mayor and council meeting of June 7th, 2021, sorry.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention, motion carries. And 786, City Council Rules and Procedures. So, this is basically the rules and procedures from last time. We move them forward. You can take a look at them. If there are rules and procedures that you want to change, or if you want to delete, if you want to change it, remove it, or add something, let us know, and we can make those changes before it comes to the council on June 7th. If not, that's our recommendation on what we had for the last 2 years, and then these are the rules that that the mayor and council would follow for the next 2 years. Comments?
If you want any
Counselor?
changes, how soon? Probably another
Well, you
week or
need-
so?
Well, you got 2 weeks before the next
2
meeting.
weeks, okay.
So, whoops,
It'd be
next Monday is the
holiday.
5th Monday, so we will not have mayor and council or committee of the whole. The first Monday in June is the 7th of June. So that is when the council, you would be voting on this. So if you have changes or if you have recommendations, whether changes, deletions, additions, you need to get them to mayor and council office so that we can get them out to everybody for review, so that when you vote on it on June 7th, then everybody has the same document.
Didn't we set up a rules committee a few years back with just three? I remember Conrad, myself, and Jill were, I think, did the...
Well, we could, if you want to do that, you can set it, the council, if you want to set up a rules committee, we can do that, or, you can set up a rules committee if you want to, or you could look at these individually and decide. We've gone about it a couple different ways. One time we set up rules committee, one time we didn't. We just let the council take a look at it, and then if they had questions, they brought it up. If you decide that you're going to do, so if you decide you want to consult each other, you need to be careful not to include more than 3 in your discussion, because you
Right.
just had a meeting.
Right.
Because you can't have, it. So we have not had a brief on this yet. We will get a brief, what month am I in now? May. A brief in the next month, June, to talk about FOIA, Freedom of Information, and what the definition of meeting is, what it's not, and the fact that something innocent could quickly become a meeting. For example, if you start collaborating through email on this, you could become a meeting, so don't do that. Don't have a meeting. So if you do it 3 or less, then you're not having a meeting. But 4 or more is a quorum.
Okay.
Counselor Norris? Yeah, so it gets picked up on the,
Right. I guess I just have a question regarding Rule 9, Committee Operations, letter D.
786. Let me get there.
Section 9, Committee Operations, Section D. Committee reports shall contain the date, place of meeting, names, da-da-da-da-da-da. And I'm wondering, is that a written report, obviously, or a verbal report?
Which rule is this?
Rule 9,
Rule 9, Committee Operations, all right.
Section D.
Committee report shall contain the date and place of the meeting, names of the members, the fact that a quorum was or was not present, a record of any votes taken, summary discussion. So if you haven't got if you have not provided input on what committee you want to be on, you need to get those to us. Some of you have already, some of you have not, I think, unless you,
I have.
you have? Everybody has? Okay, then I'm behind. Then everybody has. So we will get those out so that you know where your committee is. So when, I assume, did Deb turn over to you about the packet that you give to the counselors? Well, hold on, I may have a different answer for you depending on the answer I get from Clerk Peters.
Not that I am aware.
Okay, so what we have done in the past is you will get a packet that gives you a template for what your committee, for your, one, you get an agenda, but 2, for your committee minutes. So you're either gonna be in group one or group two. Group one, you're the chair, you're the chair or you're an attendee. You only need 2 out of 3 to have a quorum. And then the things, and I will, yes, I will. I will attend, yes, I will. I will attend the meeting, the first meeting with you to talk you through how to hold a meeting if you haven't had meetings before.
Two people that we need.
Yep, but I'm gonna talk everybody through it. And the reason you do that is so that everybody hears the same thing. I mean, it just makes sense to me, right? Because some people may or may not be holding the meetings like we've said before, but we'll just make sure everybody hears it. And then you got the template for there. You have to, so the minutes do not have to be everything that was said verbatim. It's a high level, somebody spoke in favor of, somebody spoke against. The things you do have to have, though, is who was at the meeting, when you started the meeting, when you ended the meeting, and motions. So who made the motion, who made the second, and then what the vote was. And then who voted for, who voted against, and who abstained. So those are the kinds of things that you got to have in there.
I have paperwork on Robert's rules for meeting minutes, and I will send them over.
So we have it's a crib sheet, for lack of a better term, that helps you run this too. So we are going to have training on FOIA, and we are going to have training on Robert's rules, and that will help you in your committees, and that will also help you as counselors at large for precedence of rules, when rules apply, when you can move things, when order of precedence, those kind of things. So we will be talking about that here soon. Going back to your question. So your question was?
Is it a written report?
Yes, it's a written report. So, and typically what's happened is people would write it and then slip it underneath, because so when you get into FOIA requirements, there's posting requirements. So if you have a meeting, we have to post it publicly within so many hours, 48 hours of the meeting. And they are all public meetings, right? So the public is invited to come in and observe in your meeting. Now, they are not automatically authorized to speak at the meeting. That's up to the chair as to whether or not they recognize people in the audience. Committee members are authorized because they're on a committee, but non-committee members aren't. And some members of the public say, well, hey, it's a public meeting, I'm here, I get to say what I want. You still have to follow the rules of the committee. I know when I did mine, I got the format rather, and I typed up my minutes and just sent them to electronically. That'll be a relationship that you establish with Clerk Peters. But what some people have done is they've written them up and then they slid them out of the door, and then she basically types them up and then gets them posted. So, and so just like here, the minutes are draft until they are approved at your next meeting. Did that answer your question? Please.
Are the committee meetings Zoom?
No.
They were.
Okay. Well, were is, nope. We are going back to in-person meetings. That's why we're having in-person meetings now. The Executive Order 12A is masking 12B. 12B talks about remote meetings, but I think that's done in the end of June. So we're going to in-person meetings. That's where we're going. I prefer in-person, personally prefer in-person meetings over remote meetings. Deputy Mayor Depot.
To piggyback on that, last year, our group met outside on the grass in the summer, which was really nice. So we checked with the clerk last year because of COVID's concerns. We brought lawn chairs and sat 6 feet apart and had our meetings outside, and it was very pleasant in the nice sunny weather. So when it's nice out, I'm hoping that we
Sure.
can continue doing that. Because generally, people don't, usually you only have like 1 or 2 people. We've had a couple, in our group.
Airbnb is the biggest one I've seen in
Yeah.
4 years.
Yeah, only once in a while. So usually it's just going to be the 3 committee members. So sometimes it's nicer to have it like outside.
And I have staff working on short-term rental issues now, but I forget which committee it is, but has short-term community development. Okay, so whoever's on community development, you are going to be talking about short-term rentals. That is something that I am going to push, and we're going to get through. So, but it is a thing that is emotional. It became extremely controversial recently because it was made political. But NOANC is working on it. Town of Groton's working on it. New London has decided not to pick it up. Ledyard they have an ordinance only because they had party houses, and so they put something together, but there is a split locally about who is looking at it and who's not looking at it. A lot of people aren't looking at it. The state does not have guidance on it. Federally, there is not guidance on it. So when you get to that committee, I will come in and I'll bring the attorney in so he can give you a brief on it, because it's not as simple as what some people would like you to think it is. It is a little more complicated. So,
That's why people are staying away from
okay. Anything else on the city council rules and procedures? Now, I'll take a motion to move it to I'm sorry.
I was just going to
Counselor
ask, I mean, it was just kind of briefly on the surface about establishing a rules committee. Are we or are we not going to establish a rules committee?
Does the council want to establish a rules committee? If the council, Deputy Mayor Depot.
Sorry, I wasn't trying to interrupt.
Nope.
I was going to maybe recommend that if anyone that has questions in this next week, since we have 2 weeks till the next meeting, maybe if everyone has any questions or comments or things that they think they want to change, send them all to you. And if there's a significant amount, maybe we establish a rules committee. Because it would be kind of a waste to do it and then not make any changes.
Or I'll defer to council. If council wants to have a rules committee, then you can have a rules committee but you can have a rules committee. And we put a period on the end of that. The outcome of that rules committee will then need to be communicated to the mayor's office, so that I can communicate it to all the council, so that everybody has all the information from it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, so
Absolutely.
what's council's pleasure?
Would this be an opportunity that if we had suggestions to start with, that we communicate those thoughts to Madam Deputy Mayor, and we just take it from there?
Well, however, whatever you guys want to decide, whatever you decide you want to do, I'm okay with, although all 6 of you can't be on the committee.
Correct, right. It's got
We
to be
only
only
have 3 members on the committee.
Well, why was there one established before?
Because they
Didn't you
wanted
say
it.
there was one prior to?
But it hasn't always been, it's not like we always have a committee. Sometimes we do, sometimes we don't. It's up to the council on whether or not. I mean, if you look at this is why we provided them to you in advance, so you can look at them. If you look at them and you say, okay, I can abide by this, or yeah, I'm okay with this, then you may not need a rules committee, but if you look at them and say, okay, some of these cause me agita, then you may want a rules committee. I mean, it's up to, like I said, it's up to the council. I will support whatever the council wants.
You really, I mean, I would say you really only want a rules committee if you wanted some outside, like somebody else's voice as opposed to your own, right? Otherwise, it'd be like the mayor said, just look, see if it, I mean.
I will,
and bring it towards them.
I will tell you that the town does have a rules committee. They have a standing rules committee so that if somebody brings up something during the middle of a council meeting and says, I think we're in violation of the rules, then they go to the chair of the rules committee and they pull out the, they will pull out the rules and say, no, I don't, yes, it is, no, it doesn't, or we need, the rules committee need to meet. So,
And that is the purpose of what the city had, is that we established the rules committee after each election, but if there was any issues regarding Robert's rules that had to be discussed, it went to the rules committee for a special meeting amongst the rule committee
we haven't
members.
done that in a long time.
Correct, but that's why it's established.
Say again? Go ahead. Councilor Carter, you have the floor.
Do we typically vote on this every,
Yeah, every two, after every election, the first thing at the first committee of the whole, we talk about, and these are the rules that you guys will go by.
My second thing is there a mandated in the
Charter?
charter, is there a specific time that we have to vote for this? Or vote for the rules?
No. Charter, no, I don't, when I read the charter this morning,
We don't have to think about it now then, right? If there's no,
well, the charter is specific on a couple things. The attorney is one thing. General duties, let me go to page 5 real quick. So, under Article 5, Mayor and Council, Section 2, General Duties, B, says the mayor and council shall determine the rules for their proceedings. So that's all it says. It does not specify a standing committee. It doesn't say yes or no. It doesn't address a committee, and it doesn't say when, but typically, we try to do it relatively soon afterwards. If you're not, I don't think it's appropriate to wait like another month or two. Deputy Mayor Depot.
So I guess the question is, and I know you mentioned the town, but I don't know if any of you have read, I haven't even read the whole rules for the town, but there's 9 of them and their rules are a lot longer than ours. And I don't think, like, we've never really had an issue, at least in the last 4 years, with people not following rules or any issues with the rules, which isn't to say we shouldn't have a rules committee. But I also think that before we decide that tonight, because if everyone looks at the rules and everyone's fine with the rules, then it would seem silly to establish a committee tonight just to say, oh, the rules are good. So that's why I was suggesting, I think maybe give everyone a week and get some feedback. And if there are enough counselors, or I mean, even one really counselor that says, hey, I don't like this rule, or I think we should change this rule, then maybe we can establish that at our next meeting.
And with that, here is a way to do this. Take a week, go through them. If that's not enough time, then we can always, at the first meeting, the next meeting, which is June 7th, when you get to committee referrals, we could make a referral to establish a rules committee and refer the rules and procedures to that committee based on the questions that council has cumulatively. Is that reasonable? Is that acceptable to the council? Councilor Sheffield, you have a comment?
Yes, and I mean, it's fine if everybody, to give us that week, but just keep that in mind to where, again, the Rules Committee isn't just for the rules that, like I said, after each election. If anything comes up regarding Robert's rules that has to be, discussed, the Rules Committee will go separate and actually go into executive session, if I'm not mistaken, and go over that matter right away. So something to also consider. That's why there's a Rules Committee, not just for the ruling of the rules for this next 2 years, but also future potential conflicts with, within a meeting itself.
Any more questions or comments on this? Okay, hearing none, I'll take a motion to move this to the mayor and council meeting of June 7th, 2021.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstention, motion carries. So just think what this would be if we had started at 7:30 instead of moving. One of the things we did a couple years ago is I went through the charter, and there was no, like, for example, mayor and council meetings are specifically identified in charter 7:30. We decided then that since it wasn't delineated, the committee of the whole, we moved them to 6 o'clock, because sometimes our committee of the whole meetings go long. So with that, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
Make a motion to adjourn?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention? Motion carries. Thank you, council, for your time tonight and for doing this. Thank you all.
All right.